Welcome to the Restoring Our City podcast. My name is Jobin. We are excited to bring you another episode where we are interviewing two great leaders from our local community who are doing some incredible work. You don't want to miss this one. Joel, Mathew, and Prince Ittickathra are the founders of Piesa Giving. It's an online app for donating to charitable organizations and also churches around the country. It's really great for what they've designed. And they are also the hosts of Giving Connected, another podcast which you should subscribe to, where they interview some great nonprofit leaders who are supporting some worthy causes. So it's a really great conversation. And I think it really encapsulates what Restoring Our City is all about, impacting your community and bringing awareness to how we can restore it. And so you don't want to miss this episode. And if you do find our content encouraging, please share it with others and subscribe. You can follow us as well on social media. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Restoring Our City, as well as on Twitter at The Rock Podcast. You can find all that information on our website at restoringourcity.org. Thanks again for listening. So welcome everyone to the Restoring Our City podcast. I'm super excited to have some local friends on the podcast from the Chicagoland area. Prince and Joel are on from Piesa Giving, and they are also podcast hosts of Giving Connected. So if you haven't already, subscribed to that podcast and check it out. I'm super excited to have these guys on because like when we talk about restoring our city, you know, like the viewpoint is to how can we better impact our community? And these guys are doing that in a very practical and innovative way, I would say, through their app, Piesa Giving. So check it out in the App Store and download it. But Prince and Joel, how's it going, guys? It's been forever since I've seen you. How's things going?
Yeah, it's very good, very good. Busy and trying to stay busy, but thankfully work is busy, and then Piesa Giving is keeping us busy, so it's been good.
Yeah, nice. So it's always good to see you, but yeah, busy, and hopefully this conversation is good. Hopefully people can understand, you know, where we're coming from and kind of the experiences. So
yeah, no, totally. And just for context, I've known you guys for a while. I know you're from the Chicagoland area. I kind of want you to introduce yourselves, but like, I remember we partnered together years ago to do that Christmas party, right? And like, yeah. I kind of got to see your hearts behind just serving the community. And so then when I saw you guys launched an app and are starting this, it was just, it's encouraging for me to see people in our community do something impactful, right, for others. And I appreciate the heart. But for our listeners who may not know you, kind of introduce yourselves. Maybe Prince, you can start, and Joel, you can follow. But like, tell us a little bit about who you guys are, where you're from, and how you got interested into starting an app.
So how we started the app is like a long, but also pretty simple story. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Prince. As Joel mentioned, I'm born and raised, or Jobin mentioned, as Jobin mentioned, I'm born and raised here in Chicago, and Joel and I have known each other for what, pretty much our entire lives, I would say. And our families have known each other, I think, and obviously have known you, Jobin, for quite some time. So I work in construction, in the construction industry. I'm a project executive for a construction contractor here. So like, developing an app and hosting a podcast is totally outside of my wheelhouse and very new to me. And so this has been like an interesting process to learn it. But as you mentioned, like, you know, we've been involved in church, and I grew up being very involved in church and still am now, especially within the Malayali community. And, you know, that passion to serve our community and serve the church has really, I think that's really what stemmed the company that we formed, and then even this podcast, just to encourage like that community aspect of things.
Yeah, and I'll say a little bit about me as well. I think coming from business side for all my life, right? I think you know, born and raised in Chicagoland area, you know, known Prince for a while as well. I think it's like you mentioned, it's something different, right? I think that the giving space is completely different than the for-profit space, right? So I think it's through the times I've been in nonprofits, you know, local CCF like nonprofit here in Chicagoland community, and kind of doing things like Feed My Starving Children, which is like a one-day Saturday thing. It's those little experiences that kind of really give you that in-touch feeling of, you know, looking outside your perspective, right? And I think a lot of us have, including myself, have the perspective of like a regular day-to-day job, or of making that money, doing your own thing, you know, living your own life. But when you get to touch other people in different ways, in those small ways, it really changes that. And kind of that's where it got started, right? And The story of Piesa Giving is really a simple one, but it's we were sitting in a meeting for PCNAC, which is a large Indian Christian kind of convention, and I was sitting there and kind of thinking, the meeting was good, and it was the organizers did a really good job, but the problem was, I didn't have cash, and nobody carries checks anymore, right?
Right.
So what to do? That's kind of where that situation came out of, and something kind of just spoke to me, and I told Prince about it, and Prince was like, super excited, and then we were really excited about it, and then a couple of days later, my uncle Titus, I was just kind of telling him about it. This is kind of something that's on my heart, and Prince is kind of joining, and he's like, "Let me join too." And that's when I was like, "Oh, this is maybe a thing. Maybe this is something that we can get traction on, kind of going." But we've had our share stumbles and challenges, but it's been good.
Yeah, definitely. I think the one thing we realized was, we started the company from something that's like such a practical need that I think a lot of people have faced. I mean, you're like sitting in church, you want to donate or, give your tithe or offering, and like, okay, I don't have a cash and I'm a millennial, so I'm definitely not carrying a check. And it's like, okay, can I swipe my credit card? No, that's not an option either. So literally, I think when Joel texted me that week, I was like, I'm pretty sure I texted him and I told him, dude, like I had this exact same struggle in that meeting. And I think in the meeting, I had no cash, and we were just telling somebody this, like, I don't know if it was Joel or somebody else gave me $1 to put in the offering basket.
We've all been there, right?
Right, exactly. And I was like, oh, I contributed something. But in the back of my mind, it's just idea like, man, it would be cool if there was like a way that I could do it just through my phone. And so when Joel reached out to me, I was all for it. I mean, there's a need, and it's cool to see that, for something so simple and small that we almost mindlessly do, that we can develop something that just makes that process even easier.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, I think you've often heard it's like the entrepreneur spirit, right? And I think a lot of people these days want to build something, but people want to build something, they just don't know what, right? And I think that's every person who's listening or ever thinking about it is kind of just thinking, how are you affected by life, right? What's affecting you by life? Not trying to solve somebody else's problem, but trying to solve a problem that you see, right? And that's something that I kind of spoke to, because I was thinking, I really want to start a business, but I do want to start a business that does something useful, right? Not to just start a business just to start it, right? So I think that's where, even doing this, if, I often say, even if we don't ever fully make it to the place I want to be, I'm happy. I've just got this opportunity to start it, right? And just do something that's I've always wanted, like something that's a dream of mine, right? So I think that's always something that, we never know where we're going to go, but we're excited to take every step.
Yeah. That's such a great kind of story. Man, Prince, even when you said like, can I borrow $1? I feel like when I was a little kid, go to my dad and get $1. But now I'm going to tell my kid to download the Piesa app. You better get an account and just donate yourself if I ever give you an loss. You know what, Joel, I appreciate you sharing that, man, because like, I feel like sometimes we glorify the entrepreneur spirit just to have something, just to be a leader, but you're not solving anything, right? Or this might not be something you're passionate about, but I really appreciate that background. So you have the app, and now you guys have started this off, and it's really cool. I'd encourage everybody to kind of check it out. But then you also took that to the next level to start a podcast, which I'm so curious about. So we can share in each other's struggle, and I can maybe just use this as a therapy session, because like not a lot of people I know have started podcasts. But tell us a little bit about that and how the podcast portion of this fits into the story.
Yeah, so we, in talking about like, okay, what's a marketing strategy? I think with any business, you have to have marketing in order to grow and to see that. So we're trying to think of, okay, what are ways we could market the app that we had developed? And one of the things we thought about was, starting a podcast would be a really good idea. And it's funny, like the podcast has kind of taken on a life of its own now, because where we originally started this with the intention of like, okay, this is a good way to bring awareness to an app that we developed, it's actually turned into a lot more than that, where we realized that there is a need for people to know about so many causes and initiatives that people are taking up that oftentimes they wouldn't have the opportunity. And an organization, a nonprofit, a lot of time their budget is small and they may not have the opportunity to market or have that ability. And if we can start something that brings awareness to the campaigns they have and the things that they're doing, we're assisting them in what their effort is. And, Joel and I think almost every podcast we've talked about this, or we kind of tell everyone that we interview, our goal is just bring awareness. That's it. We just want people to know what your mission is, what your story is, because at the end of the day, I think the big thing is like being a community, being a world, like a global community, we want to support each other. And sometimes we're faced with like what's right in front of us and we only see the struggle in front of us. We don't think about the fact that maybe on the other side of the world, or maybe not even on the other side of the world, down the street in the neighboring state, there is a desperate need or something that is happening that you can contribute to, that you can impact. And so I think the big thing was we've realized in starting the podcast that awareness goes beyond just what's happening in front of you. There are needs and there are causes and things that we can support beyond just where you're at, the place that you're currently living.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good way, especially because just like the starting the business, sometimes you start it and it kind of takes a different form, right? Even for me, talking to different people, me and Prince talking to different people every week, I get a new perspective every time I think of something different, right? I think my life improves a little bit every single day when I talk to a new nonprofit, right? Today we talked to a nonprofit that does helps with kids who have AIDS, right, in Africa, helping support that and kind of that work, and another one about wells in Africa. So, there's so many different things that, it's given me a new perspective, kind of be more grateful for my life, right? The privilege that I have, every day, living in America, right? So, both things like Prince had said, it's kind of taken a new shape and a new form, but it's gonna, we're still getting better at it. We're not that good yet,
No.
So it's a kind of a gradual improvement every day, but I look forward to getting to our 100th episode and hearing how bad we were in the first.
Right. I feel like I hear that from seasoned podcasters, and myself included. Like I'm not a seasoned podcaster, but it's just like, man, you see this growth, but like even just the way that you start something new and it evolves and you start to see, hey, I can make this better, and you guys grow as people. So can you talk to me a little bit about the challenges that you guys have experienced, whether it's just developing the app or even just starting the podcast? What are some of those challenges that you guys have seen in just this kind of startup type of phase?
For me, I think for every person, it's the number one thing is fear, right? I think the fear of getting started is going to be the number one thing. Even when I started, and I listened to I think the last podcast, and they were talking about all the things, excuses you can put up, right? And I really like that last episode of. So I think that's for us, is even for me and Prince as well, is stacking up everything that could go wrong, right? But it's about taking that first step, right? Even initially, it's a funny story. Even initially, we started as a nonprofit, and not started as a nonprofit because we wanted everything to go to the nonprofits as well. But when we talked to our legal counsel, they said for profit's better. So we changed that, and then we were thinking about a name, right? And we had a name issue, and the name issue, because we didn't get the first name we wanted, it took months, and even that was on me as well, because I should just kept pushing, but we didn't get the name. So I was like, oh, maybe this is not it. And stuff came like that, right? But we pushed on, and then kind of early 2020s really when we really got going. But it's little challenges like that can like really hinder the future progress. But it's been good because there's so many iterations of the app, a lot of nights of kind of going back and forth with our development team about what works, what doesn't work, and kind of seeing all those and seeing the end. We're still a work in progress, but seeing this as it is, it's been remarkable.
Yeah, I think what Joel mentioned about fear, I think like fear can be a really good, or not really good, but fear can definitely be like a limiting factor. But the other side of fear is that fear can be a very good motivator. And I think for us, there's when you start something like whether it's a podcast or developing an app and you put that out there in the world, I mean, you're opening yourself up to like either one, it can be a lot of criticism, or like, there's a lot of challenges that come along with like starting something new. And so for Joel and I mean, like, I would say this isn't really something that's in either of our wheelhouses. So there was a lot of fear around it. But I think, once we took that first initial step and got past like that initial bit of fear, then it was just kind of like, okay, we're just going to go full steam ahead. And what Joel mentioned, I think starting an app, developing an app was one challenge. Starting a podcast and like launching the podcast was like a whole nother thing, but it's been cool to see like that journey that it takes you on, where like, there's a lot of things like we don't know about podcasting that we had to learn, and we're just like, it's kind of getting like thrown to the fire, and you just have to adapt. You have to learn it. You have to research it and figure it out. And I mean, Joel mentioned like a lot of nights, like for the app, the iterations. I mean, if you could see the first wireframe that we developed, like the app looks similar to that, but the initial concept from the first wireframe looks totally different than where we are right now and what the end goal of the app is, and even the intention with which we started off and where we've gotten to this point. Not that we've gotten anywhere far, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, totally. It's like, and I feel like people need to understand that, because that could be applicable to like anything you start, right? Like when you look back at it 10 years later, it's like, wow, crazy. It's crazy how we started off with this concept and then it just evolved right into something completely new and better, right? Like, and we learned those lessons.
You're like, if you go to our website, you'll see one of the like our mission statement. Part of that is steward a global culture of selflessness. I think like that's ultimately we want to be. You want to be selfless. You want to put others before you, because for as much as we may struggle as individuals, there is somebody that is struggling more, and what you have is more than they have now or what they will ever have. So I think like to be able to start something with the intention of like, hey, let's build a community, like an atmosphere of community within like from a global perspective. I think that's just like to be able to see that, okay, we're trying to, or we're starting to impact that, or we're trying to bring more awareness to that need in itself,
Yeah, I love that, because I think one of my questions too, as I, heard about your app and things like that, and especially the kind of behind the curve way our technology hasn't been caught up to some of our organizations and processes. But now you have like Venmo, you got Quick Pay, and you got some of those things, right? And so what do you feel is that differentiator? Because just hearing you guys talk, it's not just about the app, but it's about culture. So how would you speak to the differentiation with Piesa Giving?
So one of the things that, and we've talked about this with other people as well, like, our generation is like the microwave generation. You want everything right here, right now, served to you easily. And so like we thought about like, okay, what can we do to like serve that generation? Like how can we make sure that like the millennial generation or like our generation or younger is encouraging or encouraged to give and support their communities, whether that's a church or even like Joel was saying, like volunteering at Feed My Starving Children. I mean, giving doesn't look, how do I phrase this? Giving isn't just in like monetary. Giving can be time. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize. Like when you hear of nonprofit and you hear of like a donating, people automatically assume they're talking and referring about like to donating money. But the reality is like sometimes it's just time that you can donate, and that serves the organization even more than a financial donation will. And so our goal again was, if beyond the app, like one thing that when we talk to people about like joining the platform, Joel always has mentioned this one thing, our goal isn't that you're going to donate through our app, or, I mean, if you do, that's great. But if you go to like our app, you discover an organization, you go to their website and you donate or you learn about it and volunteer time to that organization, but you used our app to find out about that, then we've still accomplished our mission. Because at the end of the day, awareness is what we're trying to bring.
Yeah, and it's a good point about, we've talked to a lot of nonprofits, and they say the same thing. Sometimes they need a web developer. Sometimes they need a person doing graphics. Sometimes they need somebody spending some time at the warehouse putting, helping out with something else. It's I think a lot of times even I've said, oh, I don't have the money, maybe a younger, but especially when I was 17, 15, I had so much time, right? So I think that's
Yeah.
when you utilize that time. I think once you get older, you have less time, but you have more money, right? It's a
Yeah.
balance of like, when are you going to use it? And I think with all the apps, with Venmo, I think the one key thing is building that sense of togetherness, right? You can add people on there, right? If Prince is following another organization and I'm see, oh, he's following that, oh, maybe that's a good one, right? There's special causes in there. If you're donating to something, you could see it. I think there's a lot of good ways to kind of give, but it's kind of, it's going to be a continuous work in progress, right? I think
Yeah, but
we always be flexible with how we do it and how we build it. I think as people kind of see how it's going to go.
Yeah, like you mentioned Venmo or like Chase QuickPay, right? Like, so if I borrowed $10 from Joel and I got to pay him back, like Venmo and Chase QuickPay, and those means methods are like there, and those are very easy ways to like pay somebody back. But like within the app, like Joel was saying, like this sense of community, like I can go to Joel's profile and I can see who Joel is following and what organizations. And maybe Joel's following an organization that I don't follow. And because I saw it on his profile, now I've learned about them, and maybe that's something that I want to support. So it kind of like the app does more than just like give you the ability to donate easily. It helps you learn about things that you probably never would have heard about. I mean, Joel mentioned the organization we interviewed this morning. It was AFC AIDS, and I've never heard of that organization in my life. But the amount of work that they do and the impact that they're having in like sub-Saharan Africa is amazing, and it goes beyond just supporting like the mission of like solving the AIDS crisis. I mean, they're impacting people's lives long term. And so I think like I was able to learn about that. And that's just simply because, I mean, in my case, it's through the podcast. But if I was just on the app and I was scrolling and I saw it, then like now I've learned about something and I can actually see that like, wow, this organization is impactful. I would have never heard about them before, but now I can support what they're doing.
That's super encouraging to hear, because you're fostering this culture, like you said, of stewardship and selflessness, which I think is very biblically focused, right? It's like that's such a great community aspect, and it's more than just looking at Venmo and seeing who paid somebody else for tacos last night. It's like, man, this is such a great cause. And so you guys talked about just obviously growing up in the church and then being part of nonprofits, or just even being in the business sector. And I've been listening to some of your podcasts as well. I was so excited when I was listening to the Blind Cat Rescue episode. I first thought you guys interviewed that person from Tiger King. I'm like, Big Cat Rescue? Is this from like what's happening?
That's a goal, though.
Yes, it's a goal to have Joe Exotic, right? But no, it's awesome to hear, because I didn't know about just blind cats and even just how people are doing their part to save some of these animals. And that's so cool to see you guys bring awareness to these causes. So I kind of need to hear this like from you guys. What's the craziest stories? What's some of the interesting things that just jumped out at you and maybe that you've learned through just podcasting with these nonprofits?
Yeah, I think there's been some crazy sport. For me, the best part is kind of the inspiring parts, right? There's been some crazy ones where we talked to somebody, Q Center, for missing persons, and she joined because her sister was murdered, and Q Center helped resolve that. Helped get them that resolution, as they call it. So there's so many different things that we see, and I think that's why every day I get to talk to somebody new, regardless of how many viewers the podcast gets, regardless of how far it goes. I will forever be impacted by it, right? That's why, like I said, for the business as well, I don't know where the business is going to go. I don't know where the podcast is going to go either, but I'm happy every step of the way. Or I'm excited to do it every step of the way. That's why I think perspective is so important, right? I think hearing like Prince's life story or somebody else's, like if I'm only in a certain area and I never get a perspective of somebody else's story, I'm only affected by my bubble, right? And I think that's why every time I talk to somebody else, I get into a new bubble, right? You're introduced to a new world that I would never understand, regardless if I go on their website or read their bio, until you talk to somebody and you truly understand, where they're coming from, what they've been through. It's just different. So I think that's why, the podcast space is so awesome. And I think a lot of nonprofits we talk to, they don't have a marketing budget, right? They don't do advertising because they're trying to spend every single dollar that someone gives them directly to the end user, right? So I think that's where mediums like podcast or Facebook or social media is so important, because they get the word out for practically $0, right? So I think if we accomplish that, it's usually the end goal as well.
Yeah, I think Joel mentioned something that's like I've been thinking about a lot, is like the perspective idea. I think sometimes we don't realize that a change in perspective can really impact your whole life and your whole view on things. And I think if anything, between developing an app and starting a podcast, the one thing I've learned more than anything is that like sometimes I just have to take a look at something from a different perspective and see beyond what Joel said, like see beyond just my bubble and what's right here in front of me.
I love that. Just getting into another bubble. That's really awesome. Just to see things from a different point of view. And I feel like even in our society today, we need a lot more of that, right? Like we need to understand that we are sometimes our focus is very narrow and we don't see what's really going on. And that's why I really love kind of what you guys are doing. You are really introducing things that, I'm not a cat person, but I listen to a nonprofit on people doing amazing work, right? And it's like you just see the passion that people have to just help their community, which is so awesome. Can you give us kind of the brief synopsis of what you can do on the app and what are some of the capabilities within it?
Yeah. So I think it's really simply, you can find an organization, you can favorite them, and you can give, one-time reoccurring. You can kind of, if they have projects they have or special causes, you can, specify where you want your money going. You can find other people, like we had mentioned, if Prince is on there and he's following certain organizations, you can also be private. If Prince doesn't want to show who he's following, you can make that private, of course. But if you are okay with that, you can see who your friends are, right? I think like we talked about it builds a sense of community, right? But there's also a lot of things like on the first page when you see it, you'll see like a Piesa recommends, a trending now, right? So if there is something like a forest fire, for example, or something that's happening right now, people want to give right now, that's a really good way to like see what's going on and quickly give. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of different variations. I
Yeah.
think it's still improving as well.
Yeah, and from like an organizational perspective, I think like the one thing that the app does that really helps organizations is it gives them the ability to differentiate projects. So if you think of it from like the perspective of a church, like a church has a general fund that you can donate to, but like let's say I want to donate specifically to the church's like Sunday school ministry or their youth ministry or a building fund. A church can go in, they can set up what we call like projects or special causes, and I can go on the app as a user and donate specifically to that ministry within the church. Or if if the church is supporting like a ministry in India and that's a special cause that they've set up, I can donate specifically to that area of their funding.
That's so cool. I mean, so all of our listeners out there, I know we have a lot of South Asian Christian people who listen to this podcast from lots of different states. Tell your church to get on this app and you can get some donations to your specific ministries. And there's so many great people who are doing great work. Why not help concentrate that? That's so cool and innovative, guys. And I love that focus. It's really building community using technology. And I think we need more of that, right? I think that's a great way to just not it's past giving monetarily, but like you guys have been talking about, it's more than just giving of money, but time, effort, and awareness and building awareness. And so I think all of this ties really well into some of the attributes that I'm always encouraged by you guys by is your faith and how actively involved you are in our churches and our community. Locally in Chicago, I can say that with confidence of what you guys do. And so can you just kind of share with our listeners how like your faith plays a role in giving and even just your inspiration to do what you guys are doing now?
Yeah. So for me, I'd say, even for Joel, I think we both grew up in church, very involved in church, especially like CCF, which is like our youth organization here in Chicago. We're both even now actively involved and a part of CCF. And like, if the goal is community, which has such an impact on your faith, like a real impact on your faith, and especially being involved in volunteering our time to these organizations or even our own church, that's really what stems this idea of like giving. Because when you go, at least let's take the Malayali church, for example. If you're going to a Malayali church, more often than not, what you're giving is your time. Like if you're on the worship team, you're waking up early to get to church early for worship rehearsal. If you're volunteering as a Sunday school teacher, whatever it is. And I think like that aspect of giving time is kind of ingrained in us, having grown up in the church, serving the community. And I think like for the podcast and the app, that's really where that stemmed from, is that like we're called to give, we're called to like reach out to others. We're called to go and seek others. I mean, that's literally what the Great Commission is. And I think sometimes like a lot of times we think of it as, oh, I have to go and like throw a tract at somebody or throw the Bible at somebody. And the reality is like the love of Christ can be in the form of giving, whether that's time, and you can give love and sometimes giving time does look like giving love. So again, it's not just a monetary thing. It's not just, there's 1,000 means of giving, but at the end of the day, like, you are accomplishing what you're called to do from a biblical perspective.
Yeah, I agree with everything Prince said. I think even with the platform, we had initially started with just churches, and then we grew as as COVID kind of started, right? And that's kind of where development started. We grew to nonprofits as well. And I think that idea of serving the least fortunate, right? And I think giving out of the abundance past what we consider tithe and what we're required to give, past what all that is. I think that's important. Even for me, I think I'm still improving on my giving, right? I think, like we had mentioned before it would be whatever you have in your wallet, right? That's the dollar or two or five, whatever it is, right? But now change that mindset into committing a certain amount for God, for your church, for everything, right? I think that's a difference. If before it was whatever's left over I give to God, right? Now my first priority is giving to God, and then everything else is left over, right? I think we often need to prioritize where we're giving and what's important in life, right? So I think that's something I'm still working on, something I still struggle with. I'm sure a lot of people as well. But I think that's where, just kind of this building that habit of giving starts that, right? And I think for me, at least, my church was the first place where I started that habit.
Yeah. And I think if you think of like a direct biblical example, like look at like the story of the widow's offering, right? Like 2 pennies, like all she had, she gave. I think like that's really what it is. Like it's not that you have to live a life that in poverty and give everything you have. The thing is, like, there is what you are asked to give, what you're called to give, right? Your tithe, but then the offering goes beyond the tithe, right? Like, give all that you can, because at the end of the day, like, really, not to get like very preachy, but like, God gave his son, like Jesus gave his life so that you could give time, so that you could give your offering. And like, you're asked to give so little. So at the end of the day, like, what is actually stopping you from giving something so small as just time?
I mean, yeah, please get preachy. I mean, I feel like that's definitely what we need. Like when the gospel works in us and it works through us, we get to give, and God loves a cheerful giver. And I think what you guys are doing is cultivating what God intended for us and for our communities. And I'm so excited about that. You guys know like how I love community, and how like we as an organization just love seeing what you guys are doing as positive influencers in the people and communities around you. And I think this is such a great, innovative way to do that. And that's why I was so excited to have you guys on, because this just aligns so perfectly. And I'm excited for you guys. It's so awesome to see people in our community, especially our younger generation, just take the initiative, not to just follow the world, but like, hey, I'm going to follow the Great Commission, like you're just talking about, Prince, and just live it out. And this is such a creative way to do that, by not only just being super technical and creative, but it's also like, wow, what a positive way to help others. How can we support you? How can the community get behind you? What's the message that you would want to share with listeners and folks to kind of rally behind you guys?
Yeah, I'll take it two ways. I think first, I think on the point that you had said before, I think it's important that there's so many people in our community as well that are just as talented, right? Who have the smarts, who are capable to do it. Even me, I think I was presented opportunities to maybe shine a little bit, to kind of show my talents a little bit, and then I was able to do a little bit more, right? And so I think it's important that I want to support the community. I want to support community support us, but I think it's a two-way street, right? I think even for us, I've always thought about, if people are listening and they want to start a podcast, right? They have people right in this right now. They have people that they can ask, right? When we were starting off, there wasn't there was YouTube, right? I'm sure. I mean, there was a lot of avenues, but I didn't know a lot of people personally that was really close to that who started it. So I think it's important that we find people that are talented. We start training future leaders, right? I think there's so many people that you could, and how people can support us is they can check out the app. You can check out the mobile platform, the website, piesagiving.com.
And I don't want to say like criticism, but like, if you download our app and you see things that we can improve, I mean, like, that helps us. If there's things that we can do to make it better and tailor it better towards like our community or to younger people, or even if you run a nonprofit and you want to join it and you see there's something that you think we're lacking, let us know so we can look into that and see how we can improve. I think we've done that already with a few organizations that have reached out to us and have joined and told us, hey, what if you tried this? And we've been able to improve like the quality of what it is that we're offering. So that's
I think give us your worst,
Yeah.
We can take
I don't know about that.
We can take it. We can take it.
Joel can take
Don't
it.
tell it to the internet, right? Like they will jump. No.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that would be that. And then like Joel said, I mean, download the app, join, sign up for it, listen to the podcast, just support us.
Yeah. No, I totally encourage everybody to do that. It's piesagiving.com, Piesa giving.com. Check them out. Very fluid, intuitive website too. Like it's so easy to see and just be aware of great causes and organizations that are impacting our communities. Guys, I'm so excited for you. And please download the podcast and subscribe as well. Giving Connected. You can find that on all platforms as well. These guys are doing some great work. I'm excited for you guys to see what the future holds and how you can further impact your community. So thank you for being on, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Hopefully in the future we do a follow-up episode. We both see how many, how it's going along the way.
grown.
Yeah, for sure. We got to do a follow-up and just say like, all right, well, man, we sounded horrible on that first one, right?
We were awesome.
No, I appreciate it, guys. You guys are doing a great job. So keep it up and we'll talk soon. All right.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode. We really hope you enjoyed that conversation with Prince and Joel. If you haven't already, download their app, Piesa Giving, and also follow their podcast, Giving Connected, which is streaming on all platforms as well. And it's always great to see young leaders who are cultivating community and really a community of stewardship and selflessness, which I love their tagline. So connect with them. And if you find this content encouraging, share it with your friends and your community and subscribe to our podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, as well as YouTube. And if you want to connect with us, engage with us on our social media handles, and you can find all that information on our website at restoringourcity.org. Thanks again for listening.